Okay, so you all just watched the strange situation video. I hope that was enlightening about how this research is done and how people can sort of measure what attachment style children have. So there's three main attachment styles that are determined based on the children's responses. So a secure attachment is when the children are happy to explore, so they have a secure base with their parent, and so they can play and explore the room without stress or anxiety. And when the parent leaves, they may be upset, so they may cry and feel stressed because this is a stressful situation for kids, and they have a stranger there. But when the parent comes back, they're eager to reunite and they're comforted easily. So their parent serves as a support system for them and they can be comforted by their parent. An anxious attachment style is when the caregiver leaves, the children are upset, again, because this is stressful and they're with a stranger. However, when the caregiver returns, instead of reuniting and seeking comfort from them, they're angry and they reject contact with their caregiver. So they're upset because the caregiver leaves, but then the caregiver isn't a source of comfort when they come back. So these children are anxious about being abandoned, and when they're stressed in this situation, their caregiver is not serving as a source of comfort and support for them. So an avoidant attachment style is when the children explore, but they do so in kind of a detached, avoidant way so that they don't really touch base with their caregiver. And when the caregiver leaves, they're often not upset. They're kind of just detached and doing their own thing. And they can be really accepting of strangers. And so it's kind of unusual. Usually small children are more attached to their caregivers, and their caregiver is who they kind of cling to for comfort. But avoidant babies will not seek their caregiver for a source of comfort, and they're often more open with strangers. And so this is another type of insecure attachment style. The last one is a disorganized style, and this is when there's not really a clear pattern. There's kind of a mix of styles, and so the child can seem fearful, dazed, and or depressed in both situations. So when the caregiver's there, when the caregiver leaves, it's just there's not really a consistent style. But again, this is a sign of an insecure attachment, because a secure attachment is when the baby knows to go to their caregiver when they're stressed. They serve as that source of comfort. So there's one experiment that was conducted in the 50s that really kind of tested, it's kind of an exploration of this emotional connection in early development. And so what they were asking is, like, what is more important for healthy development? Is it physical touch or food or shelter? Because we know that all of this is important. You know, babies need food and shelter. They need protection because they're very, very unable to care for themselves. But they also get a lot of physical touch from their caregiver. And so Harry Harlow conducted a study with monkeys. So he had infant monkeys, and the infant monkeys were separated from their mothers when they were young, and so they were still developing, but they were separated from their mothers, and they were given two surrogate mothers that were, one was made of wire and another one was made of cloth. And the monkeys were randomly assigned to receive milk from either the wire or the cloth monkey, and so they were in the presence of both. So half of the monkeys received milk from the wire mom and the other half received milk from the cloth mom. And the researchers defined this affection bond as the time that the monkeys spent with each of the mother. And so here is a picture of the monkey with the cloth mother and then the wire mother. And so just remember that they got milk from either the cloth one or the wire one, and so they were randomly assigned. And what the results revealed from this study is that monkeys spent more time with the cloth mom even if they were getting milk from the wire mom. And so the physical touch trumped food and food, I guess, and nourishment. And so, the babies that were getting fed from the cloth mom just clung on to that cloth mom and drank the milk from that cloth mom. But the babies who were getting milk from the wire mom would go to the wire mom, drink the milk, and then come back and hang on to the cloth mom. So they spent most of their time with the cloth mother, even though they were getting fed from the wire mother. And so this study shows how important physical touch is in development, more so than food in this instance. And so this was a really kind of important study at the time, and it just, it shows how important physical contact can be. And it challenged the belief that a bond between babies and a mother was because of feeding. And so it's more than just feeding. This emotional comfort is also just as essential, if not more. So I mentioned this briefly earlier, and the book that you're reading has a great section on adult attachment, so be sure to read that. But according to this attachment theory, the attachment bond that we form as infants is the foundation for our adult relationships. And one really interesting study conducted in the 80s, these researchers printed these attachment descriptions in a newspaper, and they just printed them in this public newspaper and had people identify with which one they identified with and sort of send it in. So these were the 3 different attachment styles, and the paper just said, which one describes you? So I'll give you a moment to read these, and I want you to think about which one of these describes you, A, B, or C. So most adults can relate to at least one of these sentences. And so in this experiment that the researchers conducted, they found that these are the 3 types. And so this first one, A, is kind of more indicative of an avoidant attachment style. The middle one, B, is a secure attachment, and C is anxious. And what they found was that about 20% of participants identified as avoidant, about 60% identified as secure, and about 20% identified as anxious. And so it's kind of interesting when you ask this replicates pretty well. And so if you ask people in the general population, more than half, about 60%, are typically securely attached, and then about 20% are both avoidant and anxious. And so these percentages are pretty representative of the general population. And so it's kind of interesting. And so, I also just want to give a little caveat. There's like nothing wrong with being avoidant or anxiously attached. And so I think some people think that secure is like the best one. And I mean, I think that it's good to have to use your partner as a source of comfort and support. I mean, sure, that's great. But being avoidant and anxious there's nothing wrong with that. And you can find partners that just match you. So I think it's just important to find a partner that matches your style. And people can also change their attachment styles. And so you might start out being anxious or avoidant, but then over time, if you learn to trust your partner more, you can develop a secure attachment. And so, take this with a grain of salt. It's not, if you find yourself being avoidant or anxious, it's okay. You're not, there's nothing wrong with you. 20% of the population, 40% of the population is insecurely attached. And so there's nothing wrong with this. It's just, a way of relating to other people, and it's perfectly fine. Okay, and so I'll go ahead and take a break here, and then we'll come back and talk about adolescence.